Over the past year, I played every single player mainline Final Fantasy game, and got every single Steam achievement for every one. Some were better than I remembered, some were worse than I remembered, and some I hadn't even played before. Of course, the only way to talk about anything is to rank them. So here we go. Number 14 in last place has gotta be Final Fantasy 16. I mean, come on, there's no turn-based combat, there's no status effects, there's too much blood and swearing. Like, guys, this is Final Fantasy, not Game of Thrones. What are we doing out here? And there aren't even any party members. You're telling me I gotta play as this one dude for the entire game? I don't even get to play as the ice lady with no personality, or the guy with the sexy deep voice, or the wolf dog, or the bird guy who punched me in the face, or the blonde guy who couldn't fight like 2 people by himself, or the dragon guy who's actually pretty cool. Let's leave the Devil May Cry and Devil May Cry, everybody. This is Final Fantasy. Make it slow, make it strategic, make it magical, and give me Alexander. You can't have a Final Fantasy game without Alexander. I'd be willing to overlook there not being Alexander if the pacing was better, the villain was better, the crafting was better, if every single character, including Clive, didn't stop developing after the second time skip, and if Final Fantasy mode wasn't complete garbage. Maybe next time you don't copy all the story beats of Endwalker, Mr. Yoshi P. By the way, slavery and racism are bad. Number 13 is easily Final Fantasy 15. Once again, no turn-based combat, you couldn't play as anyone but Noctis until a later update, and there are no women in the game. Not a single woman in this entire game. Not a single Dragoon woman in this entire game. Speaking of nothing being in the game, there's nothing in this game. It's just a giant desert until it's a giant grassland, until it's a giant rock, until it's a giant swamp. There's a lot of good stuff in the game, but it's all hidden behind walls and in cracks and behind DLC. Ardyn is one of the worst villains in video games. He passes the main party about 1,000,000 times and doesn't even kill them once, despite all the chances. Everyone knows a good villain should always be trying to kill the main character all the time. And let's talk about the main characters. Let's talk about Noctis as a main character. Gladiolus is the dude that causes friction for no reason. Ignis says,
"I've come up with a new recipe."
And Prompto just looks like Cloud. Basically, the entire point of this game is you can't defy your destiny. Give up. I know I wanted to give up after playing this awful abandoned multiplayer DLC for over 20 hours just to finish the Steam achievements. It's definitely one of the worst things I've ever experienced playing in my life, and I wish bad omens upon everyone who tied achievements to purchasable content and making these achievements the most tedious garbage ever concocted. At least the customization in that DLC was kinda cool. Number 12 is Final Fantasy 13. It's a little higher than the other two because if you squint a little bit, the combat kinda looks turn-based. Also, the game has women, but the game is still very bad. You don't get a full party until Chapter 9, making the combat extremely boring until you get to Grand Pulse, which is kinda like the Calm Lands from 10 except with a way higher difficulty spike. This place is forever burned into my mind thanks to how often you have to go back and forth to grind for parts and Gil and experience to upgrade one of every single piece of equipment in the entire game and maxing out the Crystarium, which is like the Sphere Grid except you literally aren't allowed to overlevel if you want to. Enough about the garbage battle system, let's get onto the garbage characters. Lightning has all the personality of Cloud without any of the Mako poisoning. She's a hardened battle veteran who gets forced to babysit and kinda just suddenly loses her hard edge. At least she isn't annoying though. Snow is supposed to be a lovable dumbass, but he isn't lovable. Hope doesn't shut up. Fang and Vanille are fine. The only character I like is Saz, but the game loves to force him to be comedy relief despite having the most tragic story of any of the main characters. The worst part of this game has to be how the villain keeps saying over and over how he wants to die because it will cause the end of the world, and the main characters just keep going on to try to kill him and get bailed out by some bullshit over and over. I hated playing this game and will do my best to never play it again. Please stop putting politics in video games and let's get back to games like Final Fantasy VII, Bioshock, Metal Gear Solid 2, and Spec Ops: The Line. Number 11 is Final Fantasy XII. This is probably one of the weakest games in the series in every front. The characters have no development beyond the first few hours, aside from Ash. Balthier is the only fun character, and at least half the cast feels like it shouldn't even be there. There are so many nods to Star Wars that it feels insulting. The main villain never interacts with the main characters once until the final battle. You're going back north and south to areas you weren't able to get to before. You're walking through these giant landscapes that are very immersive. You're starting to feel relaxed. All of a sudden you have a ton of LP, you can unlock all kinds of gear, magic, and augments. You can't wait to find each one. You have 13 espers to find. You have 1,000,000 hunts to do. You know that you shouldn't be enjoying yourself because you aren't even doing anything in combat. And are you really even going to use the espers you get? Probably not. Anyway, this game is bad because it isn't turn-based. Number 10 is Final Fantasy X. Ha 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 ha. What the hell is so funny? You think people dying is funny? You think sin is funny? You think making me play 10 to 20 hours of Blitzball for overdrives is funny? Dodging 200 lightning bolts? Racing this dumbass chocobo? Playing this butterfly game with an awful camera? Catching all these cactars? Capturing all these monsters? Filling in these damn spheres? Finally, we have an entry in the list that's turn-based, meaning we're finally onto the good games. Unfortunately, we're forced to play rock, paper, scissors for over half the basic monsters in the game. This guy with the cool jacket and the cool demeanor and the cool speeches doesn't tell us anything because he probably hates us or something. This guy is racist, this girl is the race he hates, this girl loves magic puns, this guy is blue because he's a blue mage, and these two are destined for failure. I wonder if I will ever be able to lucid dream to the point where I can fight Seymour in my dreams and kill the annoying bastard once and for all. By the way, the church is bad. Existential dread will reach all of us one way or another. Dread it. Run from it. Destiny arrives all the same. What is the point of all this? What is the point of any of this? We're all going to die anyway. Am I just a hollow husk? Am I allowed to change? Am I allowed to skip parts of this treasure hunting minigame? What about all this frog catching I'm forced to do? What do you mean I have to beat the game in under 12 hours with this awfully slow Steam frame rate? What do you mean jump rope 1,000 times? This card game is way worse than Triple Triad. Speaking of Triple Triad, I think it's wild that they put an entire RPG around a card game. Something they wouldn't successfully do again until FF7 Rebirth. The funniest part of this game is how everyone loves to complain about the junction system, and how it's annoying that you can't use magic junction to your stats, and how long it takes to draw 100 of each magic. But I love this game because of how OP you can get early. My favorite thing to do is get a bunch of Tonberry cards for Death to Junction to Strength, and grind as much Triple Triad as I need to get the parts for Lionheart on Disc 1. Then for the rest of the game you leave Squall on low health and boom! You're having fun. Anyway, the characters suck, the story is weird, and they should have left traveling to the future in FF1. The Extreme is the best song in this series, though. Number 7 is Final Fantasy VII. I know, it's ranked too high. Everyone is tired of it, nobody likes it, the graphics suck, the battle system sucks, the romance sucks, Cloud sucks, Sephiroth sucks, Shinra is stupid, and terrorism is bad. But the thing that's really going for this game is that Cait Sith is supposed to be pronounced Ket-Shi, and is Gaelic. I recommend watching this video from Maximilian Dude explaining the entire thing. But anyway, the only reason to play this game is the slapping minigame on top of the Junon cannon. By the way, capitalism is bad. Talk about a clown show. We're really clowning around during this war. We're really going around and killing everyone and destroying everything during this war. We were really destroying the world and becoming a god during this war against this resistance. It's no joke just how fun it is to betray allies and poison the drinking water and kill and capture all the espers and destroy the world, which leads to a cult of people praising you. This game is so high because the clown is a silly little guy. Call FF5 a forest fire the way it has me killing this tree. The best part of this game is Gilgamesh. Put Gilgamesh in every single game. Every single game needs Gilgamesh. I need to hear 1,000 different versions of Battle on the Big Bridge before I die. Put it in every old game font, put it in every single genre except country, and keep putting Gilgamesh as an Easter egg in new Final Fantasy games. This game would be higher, but it contains the job system, and I don't like doing my job. This one is called Final Fantasy IV because there are 4 crystals, and there are 4 fiends. And there are 4 more crystals. The best part is going to the moon and finding out that your dad is from the moon, which makes you a moon man, which means you probably taste like cheese. Guess what happens on the moon? You fight Bahamut, and Bahamut is cool. And guess what you use to fight the final boss? That's right, a crystal. The game is quite the Crystal Chronicle. Have you ever felt nostalgic about something you've never experienced before? Have you ever walked into something without much expectations and been totally blown away with the taste of familiarity flooding your mouth? One of my biggest gripes with people when it comes to this series is everyone saying, oh, there's dungeons and there's silly stuff mixed in with all the great visuals and music. Maybe I've just played too much Final Fantasy, but a lot of the dungeons are pretty boring and the silliness usually boils down to characters just acting weird for no reason. This is why I really appreciate what Rebirth brings, since there were genuinely a ton of moments that made me laugh and like the characters of 7 more. Well, Final Fantasy III is a game where I finally felt like I was getting a true Final Fantasy experience. You start off on this floating island, which is fairly big, and then when you get an airship, you can just fly off of it and go into the whole world, which parts of were previously sunk from the power of the water crystal. To get into certain places, you need to turn yourself into a frog or use Mini on yourself. You fly over a town and get shot down because a fierce battle was going on. You eventually head to the Crystal Tower, which was inaccessible for most of the game, but you could see it towering over everything, even when the world was sunken. You use the power of the Dark Crystals and the Warriors of Darkness to fight back a literal cloud of darkness. It's Final Fantasy, so it's still weird. I recommend anyone who wants to play an old Final Fantasy game to give this game a try. Make sure to play the Pixel Remaster version so you can hear how beautiful the soundtrack is. I think I spent 3 to 5 hours of my 20 hours of playtime just listening to this version of Eternal Wind because it's just so beautiful. Number 2. This game is called Final Fantasy II because there are 2 really good songs in the game, The Rebel Army in Pandemonium. Yep, that's all it takes to get shot up this high in the list. Other than that, this game can go to hell. And of course, coming in at number 1 in these rankings after a year of playing all of these games is the very first Final Fantasy game. Of course it's the best one, the sequels are always worse than the original. I mean, look at this, you go up in a sky castle, that's pretty cool, and you go back in time, and the job system is here. And I know I said I didn't like having a job before, but it's good here because it was the first time. The first is always the best. The 6th or 7th ones are trash in comparison.